In this video, we are going to be talking about the beautiful art of forgiveness, why it's important, what exactly we need to forgive, and how to really do it. My name is Catherine. I'm an energy healer, spiritual coach, and nurse practitioner. If you need personalized coaching or an energy healing from yours truly, then you can go to my website at catherineglassman.com, or you can email me at hello@catherineglassman.com. I am going to ask for your forgiveness because my face is very red. Hopefully by the time you actually watch this video, the quality of the video will be so poor that you won't be able to notice, but it's just bad. Anyway, so forgiveness. My personal definition of forgiveness is letting go. That's pretty much it. I think that for a lot of us, we tend to forgive people or situations, or at least we think we forgive them because we can logically think about it and rationalize why it happened, why they did the things that they did, and the things that we may have learned from it, and just kind of put it away and just not revisit the issue anymore. And therefore we kind of feel like we have forgiven it. But we will know that we haven't forgiven the situation if it presents itself again, and it continues to do so, and we still are either triggered or we just haven't been able to learn how to navigate that particular situation so it doesn't return anymore. So why does forgiveness even need to happen? Well, forgiveness in essence is actually clearing karma. And you can clear karma or practice forgiveness between a person or a situation and even yourself. Clearing karma or forgiving or letting go of a situation or a person will actually not only clear it from yourself, but it will clear it from future generations to come. So if you are considering having children or starting a family, then this is something that you'll want to practice so that your future children don't have to deal with this generational curse because you have dealt with it. If you don't forgive the issue, then it will continue to arise. You'll see it in situations that keep repeating themselves, whether it's repeated types of people that come into your life, or similar situations that keep happening. It will just keep coming back until you neutralize the energy for good. And if you don't clear it, then your children will, or at least they will be responsible too. And I mean, if you are a starseed or someone who's going through a spiritual awakening, then you probably are, maybe considered maybe like the black sheep of the family, or just the different one of the family. And it's really because it's become your responsibility, or you have taken on the responsibility to clear a lot of that karma. Another way of knowing if you need to forgive a person or a situation is if you get triggered by either thinking about the situation, thinking about the person, or you get triggered by someone else having a very similar situation. So I'm going to use myself in this example. My father was an alcoholic, an abusive alcoholic, and I had forgiven him, but I haven't forgiven the situation, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I knew that I hadn't forgiven the situation because I was finding myself in either friendships or romantic relationships where my partner was struggling with some sort of addiction or alcoholism. And of course, I would be triggered and think like, why does this keep happening to me? And become very victimized in that sense. It wasn't until I was able to forgive or to let go of that situation and to neutralize that energy that those situations and those people stopped coming into my life. Now, I have done this work myself, and I also have channeled this information. So if it resonates with you, then great, and if not, that's totally fine. But I look at this in 3 stages. Stage number 1 is forgiving the situation. Stage 2 is forgiving the person, if there is a person to forgive. Usually there is. And stage 3 is forgiving yourself. The reason why I recommend doing it in this particular order is because forgiving the situation is actually going to take a lot more work than forgiving the person or yourself. The situation will often be very convoluted, and there will be a lot of facets that you need to look at. It's going to be very tricky because you have to get down to the root issue of the situation. So with me, for example, I could think about, my partner's having an addiction or having alcoholism when really, in my personal opinion, the addiction was just a symptom of the problem. So having to forgive a situation will take a lot of unpacking and a lot of peeling back the layers of that particular situation. And ultimately, what it led me to was codependency was the root issue for me. And so I had to do a lot of work on codependency. And eventually, once I healed that situation, I ended up leaving that particular relationship, and I no longer had to deal with it anymore because I ended up having better boundaries in the end. And on a spiritual and energetic level, I wasn't calling into those situations into my life anymore because I had neutralized that energy, finally. So first, you have to identify what the situation is. Is it with addiction? Is it with being cheated on? Is it with insecurities? Is it money? The list goes on, but one way that you can figure this out is if you find that you find yourself in very similar situations repeatedly. So for me, of course, started off with my dad being an alcoholic, and then I would find myself in friendships or relationships where other people were alcoholics or they had addiction issues, and then eventually I battled my own problems with addiction and alcoholism. This takes a lot of turning inward and really looking at your own self, your own shadow of why you continue to end up in these particular situations. It's going to take a lot of responsibility and accountability on your part because you are part of the equation of why you end up in these situations in the first place. So once you've identified the situation and the repeated instances that situation or that issue continues to arise, and it will be helpful if you write each one down and be very detailed about this. You really want to call yourself out, really, because you want to look at like every shadow aspect of it. And by the way, doing shadow work would be a really good adjunct to this work. I made a video on the shadow self if you want to check that out. I said that I would make a video on shadow work and I didn't, and shame on me. Forgive me for that. I'll forgive myself at some point, but maybe after I actually do it. So I'm going to work on that. But anyway, back to this video. After you have identified the issue and the different situations that issue is arising, then you'll want to look at how this particular issue is impacting your life now. Typically, we'll want to look at the situation if it is impacting our lives in a negative way. If it's impacting our lives in a positive way and we just become a better person, then that's really not something we really need to look at. If it's impacting ourselves in a negative way, like you find you are just triggered with something that other people do, you have resentment or anger towards a particular person or towards a particular group of people or something that certain people do. So for me, I would be triggered by my partners being alcoholics. There was one point where I started to become triggered by people even drinking, right? Now, other people have free will. They have the freedom to do whatever they want. And so the fact that I'm getting triggered by watching someone else, live freely means that there is something that I need to look at within myself. This is an internal locus of control, not external, right? It is not their job to adjust their behavior to make me comfortable. It is my job to look at what is making me uncomfortable and why. Do you find that you yourself are angry, or that you have addiction, or that you have PTSD? If there are issues that you have, there is a good chance that those might be symptoms of a karmic issue that needs forgiveness, or that needs to be let go of. And so for me personally, I knew that the addiction was a symptom of the problem. It wasn't the actual problem. This is why dealing with the situation first, or the issue first, is going to be the most difficult, and why this needs to be started first before anything else. Because there's just so many different things that you have to look at. And sometimes you're going to go down a path and it might not be the right path. So then you got to back up and go down a different path. And you're going to have to try a bunch of different modalities. And it's a lot of work. I actually had a client tell me that this was the hardest thing that she has ever done. And this was in regards to like addiction issues in her family that she was learning about, and that how she was calling in addictive people into her life. And it took a lot for her. And I gotta say, sometimes this is some of the hardest things that you will ever have to do. So once you've identified the issue, the number of situations that this issue has risen, how it's impacting your life in a negative way, then you'll need to ask yourself, what is this situation trying to teach me? This is the stage where you will really identify the core issue of the problem. So for me, when I was dealing with partners who were alcoholics, the ultimate and core issue that I had to deal with was codependency. And the codependency was manifesting as a way of me trying to fix my partners, because subconsciously I was trying to fix my dad. And in this stage, this is when I had to do a lot of work on codependency itself, just by itself. And so once you identify the core issue, then you need to start bringing in other modalities to work on that particular issue, whether it's therapy, self-help books, workshops, YouTube videos, Facebook groups, past life regressions, Reiki, meditation, ayahuasca, you name it. Whatever it is that you are feeling called to do, or you think is going to help you with this particular core issue, is what you're going to want to do. You're probably going to use multiple different modalities, if not maybe all of them. It really just depends on the issue and how long you've had this core issue, and how far you're willing to go to resolve it once and for all. I always recommend asking for guidance from your spirit guides. Your spirit guides already know what your higher self ultimately wants, and so they are there to help guide you in your human form. But it makes it a lot easier if you just ask them for help, because then they can really, they won't cross the boundaries of free will and your sovereignty, because they have to respect that. They have to respect that this is your human experience and your journey, and therefore you volunteered to come here and to go through these lessons. And so they are giving you the opportunity to overcome these things yourself. But if you were like me and don't necessarily want to just do this by yourself, then I will just ask, like, please help me resolve my codependency. Show me what I need to do, show me the tools, lead me to the books, lead me to the therapy, lead me to the plant medicine, lead me to whatever it is that will help me resolve this once and for all. So for me personally, I ended up reading like quite a few books on codependency and just really teaching myself what that was, what it looked like, how I identified it within myself. And of course, it turns out like codependency was just coined from Alcoholics Anonymous to describe those that were partners of alcoholics. So it was interesting to watch that come full circle, because I had no idea that that's where that term came from, and that's exactly the issue that I was dealing with. This is going to be the longest stage probably for the most part, because like I said, it's going to take a lot of introspection and just a lot of looking inward. Journaling will also be a good way of looking at what your subconscious is trying to say. You'll also want to look at your dreams. And if you're brave enough, you might want to consider asking other people, whether it's a professional or whether it's, a coach like myself, or if it's friends or family, as long as it's someone that you can trust, that will be objective and not biased and is coming from a place of love. You don't want to seek out advice from someone who is also going to be triggered or hasn't done their own work, because they will often project their own issues onto you, and you don't want that. You want a very clean and clear opinion about what you may be going through. And of course, whatever it is that you do or whoever it is that you speak to about it, they are just going to be a puzzle piece to your picture. They will be a puzzle piece to the picture that you are building. And so we don't necessarily want to give our power away by expecting other people to fix the issue or the plant medicine to fix the issue. It is just giving us a window into looking into what it is that we need to look at, and eventually finding the tools to help us overcome it. Stage number 2 is that we want to forgive the person. Most of the time, there will be a person that needs to be forgiven. And if there isn't a person, well, then that's great. I guess you don't have to work on this stage. Now, let me be very clear that forgiving a person does not mean letting them off the hook necessarily. It doesn't mean that they will not be held responsible or accountable for their actions, especially when it comes to something that is like criminal. And maybe this is just my human opinion, but if it is criminal, then they should be held accountable. And this is more of a responsibility to other humans and society as a whole, to ensure that others are not being hurt or victimized by this particular person. And if, in my opinion again, if I have the ability to ensure that this doesn't happen to someone else, then I am going to, go through with that. But again, that's just my opinion. Not everybody, believes that, and that's okay. But just keep in mind that doing this kind of work can potentially lead to more karma. And so, when I was channeling information for this video in particular, I was trying to think of the worst thing that somebody could ever do to someone else. And of course, the worst thing that I could think of was criminal, and it was crimes against children. And so if I found out that somebody had done something to a child and I chose not to report it or to hold them accountable, then I potentially could create more karma within myself, because, there could be something with like disempowerment or, something to that effect. And if that's the case, then I may be presented with this situation in the future. Or if I didn't hold this person accountable and then they ended up hurting another child, then that for sure would create more karma. So, like I said, forgiveness is not about just letting them off the hook as a human. The forgiveness is about letting go of the negative energy that we hold towards that person. So the forgiveness really doesn't have anything to do with them necessarily. It has everything to do with you. And to go back to holding them accountable, sometimes the forgiveness can't happen unless you hold them accountable. So like with that same example, if this person was just out roaming the streets freely and I, had the power to maybe stop them and I didn't, then it would make it more difficult for me to forgive them, because I would hold like some sort of resentment towards the fact that they were free. Or I would hold some sort of resentment or something, or I would be triggered in some way because nothing was done. And at least if I tried my best and did everything that I could and knew that that's what I did and that nothing could be done despite that, then I could move on to forgiveness. But of course, I think that's just with most cases. That might not be with every case. I clearly don't know everything, but this is just the information that I've channeled. And, take that with a grain of salt too, because I also have this, I have like a warrior type of energy in me that really doesn't like injustice. And so I'm coming from that perspective. So I just want to be, completely transparent and honest with you about that. Now, of course, it's really important to not have the energy of revenge or to want to hold anybody accountable or to do anything to this person from a self-serving place, because that will create more karma that you're going to have to clear at some point. This ultimately has to be something that you do that will serve the whole. Now, the best way that I can forgive a person is through two ways. The first way is to recognize that this person may likely be from your soul group, meaning that likely you have had past lives with this particular person, and before you came to this planet, you likely contracted to have this interaction with them in order for you to grow and evolve. It is very likely that this soul volunteered to be the villain in your story so that you can learn to become stronger, smarter, wiser, and ultimately the hero in the end. And so with my dad, for example, I know that I have many past lives with my dad's soul, and we were different things from different, past lives. And in this particular lifetime, he had volunteered to be my dad and to be the way that he was so that I could grow up to be the person that I am today. And I am very proud of who I am today. I've done a lot of work. I've come a long way. And I really couldn't have done it without him and without all of those situations. And so if you think about it that way, that's actually a pretty incredible gift to give someone. And it's a gift that is not something that they're conscious of. Most of the time they have no clue because they're still dealing with their own issues. Like they're not on the spiritually awakened path, and so they don't see life and existence the way that some of us do. And so they're of course going to still continue to, do their human, lower vibrational things. Meanwhile, their soul is very much aware of what is going on. And so if you look at it from that point of view, then it does help you give a little bit more grace towards them. And I was able to confirm this after my dad passed away, because I did a lot of, when I forgave my dad, I actually did it out of order, because my forgiveness with my dad was during my awakening, and I did a lot of forgiveness work with him because that's what I thought I needed to do. And when I forgave him, I remembered I was in the middle of a yoga class and I literally felt this energy rise off of my body. And that's when I understood what it meant to have something lifted off your shoulders, because that's exactly what it felt like. I literally felt lighter, and I started crying in the middle of this yoga session. And it was wild. It was just at this local gym. It was just with a bunch of older people, and it was quite something. But I knew, but I didn't forgive the situation, because I had to forgive the situation later on through like a romantic relationship. But it was divinely made that way, because I ended up forgiving him about a year before he passed away. And when he passed away, I had no resentment, no anger, just none. It was completely neutralized, and I was able to be there for him in his dying days, where the rest of my family had a lot of resentment and a lot of anger towards him, and they were very confused by their feelings and them being present there. And it was a very interesting thing to observe, and they found it very interesting to observe me, because I wasn't falling apart the way they were. I was very compassionate towards him, and I was able to actually like connect with him very clearly when he passed and afterwards, which is how I was able to confirm that his soul did indeed volunteer to play this out, not only for my sake, but also for his, because there were some great lessons that he needed to learn. Unfortunately, he did not learn them, so he is going to have to come back and learn them. But to see his true essence on the other side, and just to see how apologetic he was and how remorseful, and to see how loving he actually was, it was just a good confirmation to know that the soul is very likely aware of what's happening and is not consciously trying to hurt you. It is more the human that has been conditioned in this lifetime and has had bad experiences, and hurt people kind of thing. So to look at it that way, of someone who volunteered to be the villain in your story, is a little bit easier to give them grace. The second way that I can forgive a person is by looking at them through the eyes of a parent, or maybe even through the eyes of God. If we were to use the term God in the biblical sense, which I don't typically do, but I'm going to do it in this example, then, those who read the Bible, or those that, subscribe to like a Christian type of religion, will often refer to God as the Father, which Father will also be a parent, okay? When we have a child, it really is our job to love our child unconditionally. We often are not going to be perfect parents. Our children are going to live their lives. We understand that they have free will, and that this is their lifetime, this is their human experience, and they get to do whatever it is that they want to do. And sometimes they will end up hurting other people as a result of not feeling that unconditional love. As I've always said, because of some of the things that I've seen through astral travels, evil itself, from what I've seen, doesn't truly exist as it's a separate thing, but rather the absence of something. The darkness is the results of there being an absence of light. And hatred and evil is just the absence of love and compassion. Most of the time, those that, commit crimes against us do it from a subconscious, lower vibration place. They are not necessarily aware of what they're doing. And, even if they are fully aware, a lot of times that is stemming from a place of hate. And if anybody really hates other people, it's usually because they hate themselves. There's just it's just hate and pain and sorrow that they dwell in. And it's just their way of gaining some sort of control within their lives. And it's by hurting other people. It's like the classic bully, scenario, right? The bully will bully other kids because they either really want their approval or want to be friends, or it's because they are being bullied themselves, or they're being, bullied by their parents. Either way, it is usually the result of just the darker, lower energies. And, I would bet that anybody who did something terrible to somebody or committed like a really terrible crime against, a child, for example, I would bet that their parent probably would take on a little bit of that responsibility and, wonder if they had done something different, if they would have ended up becoming someone different, if they would have had a better outcome or made better choices. And, it will always be better to forgive and to let go of what this person has done, because there will always be a possibility that your child could potentially go down this road. And so knowing that if you can just give a child enough love that they'll never even want to go down that journey, that maybe that's exactly what needed to happen to this person as well. So, a lot of people wonder, like, why does God allow bad things to happen to other people? And, if we are looking at God from the biblical sense, we do have free will, and it is painful. I'm not a parent myself, but I would imagine that it is probably pretty painful to watch your child, who you love very, very much and you want the best for them, to make bad decisions and to hurt themselves and to hurt other people. But you ultimately know that you can't control them. If they want the guidance and if they want the help, then that will be the only way that they'll be able to change. And now I'm not saying that you need to love this person, because you don't need to do that. That's asking a lot. But it does kind of help you have a different perspective on the matter. And it helps you have a little bit more grace and a little bit more compassion towards another human that probably just didn't have the best upbringing, or didn't have the proper tools to deal with the issues that they had. But if you are able to reach a place of being able to send this person like love, and if you are able to send this person love, then that means that you are actually giving them unconditional love, which is extremely powerful. That is very high vibrational, and it's difficult to do. But if you can do that, then not only do you heal yourself and you heal your future generations from that particular type of person or those issues, but you also heal them too. You heal a part of them, and a piece of them that is the darker side breaks off, and you ultimately end up helping the collective by doing that. And last but certainly not least, the third stage is to forgive ourselves. If you have reached this stage, then that means that you likely have come to a place of taking personal responsibility for the part that you played in that particular situation. And, ultimately coming from like a metaphysical or spiritual perspective, we really do contract the majority of these situations into our lives so that we can learn a particular lesson. And so if you are coming at it from that perspective, then it is something that you likely chose to go through before you even came to this planet. And so the real question is, why did you choose to go through that? What is it about you that you are wanting to learn more about and wanting to change in the future? A lot of times we will be in these situations so that it can reflect back to us the things that we really need to look at. A lot of times when we're in a particular situation, we react in ways that we're not proud of. We behave in ways, especially before we go through a spiritual awakening, before we become really conscious of our own behaviors and the way that we move throughout the world. We are just kind of operating from a place of survival and really a place of ignorance. We really just don't know any better. And because we don't know any better, it can make it a little easier to give that grace to other people who have wronged us, because it's very likely that they themselves have not fully awakened. And, it's kind of like getting upset with a child for doing something that they didn't know they were doing wrong. And even if they do learn that they're doing something wrong, they may not understand the full capacity of why they're doing that or what's driving them to behave that way. And so forgiving ourselves is not only letting go of the negative feelings that we have towards ourselves, about the negative feelings that we have about our actions and the way we've behaved, but it's also about letting go of that part of ourselves that needed to behave that way in the first place. Clearly, there was a part of ourselves that resonated with those lower frequencies. And oftentimes, we have a tendency to blame the ego and things like that, when really the ego is not the enemy. Our ego behaves in a certain way to protect us. That's often why we do certain things. We behave in certain ways because we're ultimately just trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to protect our psyche. We're trying to protect our hearts. So in this stage, we are learning about the parts of ourselves that we do not find desirable, the parts of ourselves that we're just kind of more in a survival mode. We're letting go of that part of ourselves so that we can start to reflect the person that we want to be in the future. This will actually help us have better boundaries for ourselves so that we can stand for what we will and will not tolerate from others, because we ourselves are trying to be the best version of ourselves for other people as well. We're just raising the standard for everyone. But we're also understanding that we have to raise the standard within ourselves. It's not fair to feel like everybody else has to do the work and you don't. That's just not how this works. As we experience reality, reality unfolds. It is us as the observer that creates reality. And so, what does it mean if you keep having a particular reality that you don't like? Is there a chance that there is something within you that actually needs to change? I personally feel like this should be the last stage, because it just makes it easier to be able to see the situation, forgive it, forgive the other person, and then really sit with yourself and understand why you called these situations into your life in the first place, and then to actively start making different decisions each and every day moving forward. And if you do it in that order, I believe that you will find that changing your personal behavior to fit the person that you want to be will actually come a little bit more naturally. It'll just be a little bit easier and a little bit more graceful. And the beautiful part about that is that once you have done the work on yourself, if you see the situation arise again, whether it be like if you're just observing somebody else going through a similar situation, you will find that you will not be triggered because you've healed that part of you. And what's even better is that because you've healed that wound, your future generations will not have to deal with it anymore. Like, it really does become a generational curse that is broken. And it's so beautiful because when I was meditating on this particular information, I saw like chains breaking. And it's just, I don't know, it was just a really beautiful visual to see. And it takes a lot of work, and it just takes a lot of introspection and a lot of time and a lot of patience. This is not linear by any means. This might take years. Some things might take a lifetime, honestly. The whole, drinking thing for me, that took a lifetime because the majority of my life I was not conscious. And so, if you are actively trying to work on these things, then the sooner you will just evolve. Like, this is human evolution we're talking about. And our future generations, like when they are faced with a similar situation, they will be riding on your shoulders of all of the work that you have done already. So they're already set up for success. And, that's ultimately our legacy too. Whether or not you even have children is beside the point. Like, you living and existing, you're still having a very powerful influence on the world and on the younger generation. And it's just very exciting because we are in the middle of disclosure. Like, we are really shifting into a higher frequency right now, which means that the new children that are coming onto the planet are going to be the starseeds that are really going to take us even further into that frequency. And planet Earth is very challenging. And so if we can help them out in any way that we can, then we really, really should. And this is just one way. Even though it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, it is very, very powerful. And there is an interview out there with Dolores Cannon, and her work is wonderful, and she's got many books, past life regressions, and in her work, she says that the best way to clear karma is so that you never have to come back to planet Earth again, is to forgive and to let it go. So I hope that this helps. Please let me know if it does. I hope you liked the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Consider subscribing, and I will see you next time. Bye.